You know that feeling, right? Where you're sitting on your couch, maybe working or reading, and this really specific intention forms in your head, like you realize you need the scissors.
Oh, yeah, the classic mission.
Right, so you stand up, you walk down the hallway, you cross the threshold into the kitchen, step onto the linoleum, and suddenly the intention just evaporates. It is completely gone.
Just wiped clean.
Literally wiped. You're just standing there, staring blankly at the refrigerator on some bizarre autopilot with absolutely zero recall of why you even initiated this journey in the first place.
Yeah, psychologists actually call that the doorway effect.
The doorway effect.
Yeah, it's where the literal physical boundary of a room causes a sort of cache clear in your short-term memory.
That is so wild. And I mean, we all experience this, right? Or you're shaking someone's hand at a party and instantly losing their name before they even
Before the handshake is even finished, yeah.
Exactly. And we just brush it off. We joke about our brains being full or, neuroplasticity slowing down as we get older. We kind of just accept this baseline level of amnesia as a completely unavoidable condition of being human.
Well, and that acceptance has fundamentally deepened over the last, 15 years or so, because we've actively built this entire technological ecosystem designed to just compensate for that assumed biological flaw.
Oh, right. Like our phones.
Exactly. I mean, we carry supercomputers in our pockets that act as external hard drives for our lives. We completely outsource our calendars, our contact lists, our navigation, even our personal histories to cloud servers.
We really do. It's like we treat the human brain like a leaky bucket,
Right.
assuming water is just constantly dripping out of the bottom. So we rely on silicon to hold the water for us.
That's a great way to put it. But the core premise of today's deep dive completely shatters that leaky bucket theory.
Yes, it absolutely does. Because today we are looking at the mechanics of human memory through the lens of Joshua Foer's incredible investigative journey in his book Moonwalking with Einstein.
Such a fascinating book.
It really is. Foer basically posits that this very same brain, the one that falls victim to the doorway effect and forgets a name in 3 seconds, is structurally capable of memorizing the exact order of a fully shuffled deck of cards in under a minute.
Which just sounds impossible.
Right. But he says it's capable of internalizing complex sequences of thousands of random numbers or memorizing an entire volume of text verbatim.
Just staggering amounts of data.
Exactly. So our mission today is to deconstruct how a completely average science journalist went to cover the United States Memory Championship just as an observer, fell down an absolute rabbit hole of cognitive psychology, and ended up rewiring his own mind to actually compete for the national title.
Talk about getting too close to the story.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this, because the fundamental question we are looking at here is whether world-class memory is a genetic anomaly, like winning the lottery, or if it's a hidden architectural framework that literally anyone can build.
Well, I think the instinctual assumption, right, whenever we hear about someone reciting 10,000 digits of pi.
Or memorizing 12 decks of cards.
Right, exactly. Our first thought is to attribute it to hardware. We just assume we are looking at a biological mutant.
We really do. We assume it's genetics.
We assume there's a structural divergence in their prefrontal cortex or a hyperdeveloped hippocampus, or some form of savant syndrome that just grants them this inaccessible superpower. And that was the exact baseline assumption Joshua Foer brought with him when he first walked into the U.S. Memory Championship in New York.
Right, he was a science writer hunting for biological outliers.
He was looking for the X-Men.
Yes, that's exactly it. He walks into this convention hall fully expecting to meet people born with alien DNA. And individuals who are just biologically superior in every conceivable metric. But the reality he encounters, it's much closer to a room full of Batmans.
I love that analogy.
Right. He doesn't find Superman. He finds ordinary, baseline human beings who have simply spent an obsessive amount of time constructing incredibly sophisticated cognitive tool belts.
And the competitors themselves are actually the first people to dismantle that genius myth.
They don't claim to be special at all, do they?
Not at all. When Foer began interviewing these national record holders, they aggressively rejected the label of savant or genius. They actually identify as mental athletes.
Mental athlete.
Yeah, and that terminology is really crucial because athletics implies a deliberate mechanical process. It implies technique, exertion, fatigue, and highly structured training regimens.
So they aren't relying on genetics.
Exactly. They operate within this hidden subculture that's built entirely on ancient mnemonic strategies, not genetic lotteries. Honestly, if you ask the reigning U.S. memory champion where they left their car keys,
They probably wouldn't know.
they will likely struggle with the exact same doorway effect that you and I experience.
That friction right there, the ability to memorize thousands of abstract data points but still forget where your keys are, that is exactly what draws Foer in. And it culminates in this incredible inciting incident with a mental athlete named Ed Cook.
Oh, Ed Cook, he's quite a character.
He really is.
Yeah.
Ed is this eccentric, highly trained competitor, and he basically calls Foer's bluff on the whole biological constraint argument. He tells Foer that memory is just a learned mechanical skill. It's a spatial trick.
And he makes a bet with him, right?
Yes, he issues this massive wager. He bets that if Foer, a guy with a self-admittedly completely average, mediocre memory, commits to practicing these specific ancient techniques for a short period every day, he could train his mind to compete at the elite level in just 1 year.
Which is just a staggering proposition. I mean, Cook isn't suggesting incremental self-improvement here. He's suggesting a leap from baseline civilian to world-class competitor in 12 months.
Yeah, it's wild. But Foer accepts the challenge. He essentially turns himself into a longitudinal case study.
Right.
He spends a year consulting with cognitive psychologists, neuroscientists, and, the world's most elite mental athletes. But to truly grasp the mechanics of what Foer is actually learning to do, we have to look past modern neuroscience. We have to examine the evolutionary psychology of human cognition.
Yeah, the evolutionary mismatch is really the skeleton key to this whole mystery.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, think about it. Before we had the printing press, before the mass literacy of the industrial age, before written language was even formalized, human beings were not tasked with remembering alphanumeric passwords.
Or social security numbers, or abstract historical dates.
Exactly. Our brains evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in these highly demanding physical environments where our literal survival depended on spatial and geographical awareness.
So the brain is basically just an incredibly specialized navigation engine.
That is exactly what it is.
Mhm.
If we look at hunter-gatherer societies, the cognitive load was tied directly to the physical landscape. You needed to memorize complex topographical routes across harsh terrain.
Right.
You needed to mentally map the exact location of a specific water source, or remember that a particular cluster of rocks housed a predator, or recall the distinct visual difference between a toxic berry and a safe one.
So the brain allocated all its processing power to spatial awareness, visual landmarks, and multisensory data.
Precisely.
Wait, so are you saying that relying on our modern digital calendars and notes apps is actually working against hundreds of thousands of years of human evolutionary wiring?
In a way, yes. The frustration we feel today, like the inability to memorize a spreadsheet or a grocery list, it's not a failure of our brain's capacity.
It's a formatting issue.
Exactly. It is a failure of formatting. We are trying to force an ancient, highly evolved spatial navigation engine to run cold, abstract, two-dimensional code. We are actively fighting our own evolutionary wiring.
Wow. So we are experiencing this profound cognitive bottleneck.
Yes, and ancient human cultures actually intuitively understood this bottleneck, which is why before information could be mass-produced on paper, it was preserved through the oral tradition.
Right, because they didn't have external hard drives.
They didn't even have cheap paper. Ancient Greek philosophers, bards, orators, they didn't have teleprompters. They memorized massive hours-long epics like the Iliad and the Odyssey.
That's just mind-blowing to think about.
And they delivered these dense structural legal arguments entirely from memory. But they achieved this not through rote repetition, not just repeating lines over and over. They did it by hacking the brain's evolutionary bias towards spatial mapping.
And they codified this into what became known as the art of memory. And the mythology surrounding the birth of the art of memory, it centers on this really tragic event involving the Greek poet Simonides of Ceos. And I want to get into this because this story is the foundational bedrock of all modern memory sports.
It really is the origin story.
Yeah. So Simonides is hired to recite poetry at this crowded, lavish banquet in Thessaly. And midway through the feast, he steps outside the banquet hall to receive a message.
Just a completely mundane interruption.
Right. But the very moment he crosses the threshold and steps outside, the structural columns of the hall give way and the entire stone roof collapses.
It's a catastrophic structural failure. The guests inside are instantly crushed.
And the trauma to the bodies is so severe that they are physically unidentifiable.
Yeah, it's horrific. When the dust settles, the families of the victims are just in a state of absolute despair because they cannot identify their loved ones to perform the necessary burial rites.
But then Simonides experiences this spontaneous cognitive revelation. He stands before the rubble, and while the physical room has been completely obliterated, the architecture of that room is perfectly preserved in his mind's eye.
Right, his spatial navigation engine is still running perfectly.
Exactly. He realizes that because human brains are so aggressively wired for spatial orientation, he can mentally walk back into the ruined hall.
He can visualize the exact layout of the banquet table.
Yes. And by mentally standing at the head of the room, he remembers exactly who was sitting in which specific chair at the exact moment he stepped out. He uses this internal spatial map to identify every single victim for the grieving families.
And out of that horrific tragedy, Simonides isolates this core psychological truth. Spatial memory is the human brain's ultimate retention mechanism.
Yeah, it's our superpower.
It really is. When you tie a piece of information to a physical geography, to a specific coordinate in three-dimensional space, the brain anchors it with a permanence that abstract thought simply cannot achieve.
And this realization gives birth to the method of loci, or what we commonly refer to today as the memory palace.
Yes. The memory palace is the architecture of the trained mind. It's the practical application of Simonides' epiphany.
So how does one actually build it? Because the whole premise rests on taking the abstract data you want to remember, whether it's a grocery list, a legal argument, or a deck of cards, converting that data into striking visual imagery, and then systematically placing those images along a fixed route within a familiar physical space.
Right. To understand the neurobiology here, we have to look at the hippocampus. In the 1970s, neuroscientist John O'Keefe discovered what are called place cells in the brain.
Place cells?
Yeah, and this was a discovery that eventually won a Nobel Prize, by the way. These cells fire in very specific patterns when you are in a specific location in your environment. They essentially form a cognitive map.
Oh, wow.
So when you build a memory palace, you are deliberately hijacking those place cells.
So step one is choosing the space.
Right. You choose a physical location whose spatial map is already permanently burned into your hippocampus. So like the childhood home you grew up in, or the apartment you live in right now, or even the exact route you take to work every morning.
So it has to be a place where the spatial architecture requires zero cognitive effort to recall.
Exactly.
So like if you think about your own childhood bedroom right now, you don't have to strain your working memory to remember where the door was or where the bed was or where the closet was. You can just close your eyes and effortlessly walk through that space.
That's your foundation.
Okay, so step one is choosing that deeply familiar location. What's step two?
Step 2 is establishing a rigid, linear pathway through it. You cannot sporadically jump from the backyard to the attic back to the kitchen.
That would just confuse the brain.
Right. You must define a logical sequence of landmarks, or what they call locus points.
The linearity is critical, I'm assuming, because it provides chronological order to your memories.
Exactly. You might define your loci as the mailbox, then the front door, then the entryway rug, the coat closet, and then the living room sofa. You are establishing a mental conveyor belt.
Okay, I love that. So once that conveyor belt is established, you basically act as the curator of your own mental art gallery. The building is real, the pathway is fixed, but the items you place along the path are the pieces of information you are trying to encode.
Yes, exactly.
So if you have talking points for a presentation, you literally drop point 1 at the mailbox, point 2 on the rug, and point 3 on the sofa.
And when it is time to retrieve the data, you don't aggressively search your brain for a bulleted list.
Right.
You simply take a calm, imaginative walk down your childhood driveway, and you just look at what you left at each locus point.
Because you are effectively tricking the brain's threat assessment and navigation systems.
Yes. By attaching a mundane piece of data to a physical coordinate, the brain flags it as environmental geography. It assigns it the same level of neurological importance as a physical obstacle you might trip over.
That is so clever.
It bypasses the fragile, volatile nature of short-term memory and embeds the information deep within the structural mapping of the brain.
But, and this is but there is a massive vulnerability here, right? It's a trap that almost everyone falls into when they first try the method of loci.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if you are trying to remember to buy a bottle of milk and you mentally walk into your childhood kitchen and place an image of a standard plastic 1-gallon jug of milk on the counter, the technique is going to fail.
You will absolutely forget the milk.
Why? Why doesn't that work?
Because the human brain is far too efficient to remember something that boring, even if it is placed in a memory palace. The items you place in the palace have to pass through a very specific cognitive filter.
The brain operates under this mandate of energy conservation, right?
Exactly. You're bombarded with millions of bits of sensory data every hour. The hum of the refrigerator, the texture of your shirt, the color of the carpet. If the brain attempted to encode all of that mundane information, it would experience catastrophic cognitive overload.
It would just crash.
Right. So to prevent this, the reticular activating system and the amygdala aggressively filter out the ordinary. They just delete the expected.
So the brain is essentially a deletion machine.
Yes, it deletes the mundane to save processing power. However, the evolutionary loophole that these mental athletes exploit is called the von Restorff effect.
The von Restorff effect, or the isolation effect, right?
Exactly. The brain is hardwired to instantly notice, focus on, and retain anything that drastically breaks the expected pattern. It remembers the bizarre, the terrifying, the hilarious, the grotesque, and the deeply emotional.
Which makes sense from a survival standpoint. An anomaly in your environment could be a lethal threat or, a massive resource.
Exactly. So returning to your milk example, if you place a boring plastic jug on the counter, your brain's deletion machine wipes it in about 3 minutes.
So how do you bypass the filter?
To bypass the filter, you have to weaponize absurdity. You walk into your mental kitchen, and instead of a jug, you visualize a massive 10-foot-tall cow.
Okay, a giant cow.
But not just a cow. The cow is wearing a pristine, custom-tailored tuxedo. It is aggressively tap dancing on your kitchen island, and as it dances, it is spraying warm, fresh milk all over the walls, the ceiling, and your face.
Oh my God, okay. That is repulsive, but I am definitely not going to forget the milk.
That's the point. The imagery must be viscerally absurd, and crucially, it must be multisensory. You are aiming for maximum neural activation. You don't just want a static visual image.
You want to hear the sharp clack of the tap shoes on the countertop.
Right. You want to smell the heavy, sour scent of the splashed milk. You want to feel the ridiculousness of the tuxedo.
So when you force the visual cortex, the auditory cortex, and the emotional centers of the amygdala to all fire simultaneously, you create this incredibly dense, robust neural pathway.
Yes. The memory becomes highly insulated against degradation.
And this concept of extreme multisensory absurdity is exactly where the title of Foer's book, Moonwalking with Einstein, originates.
Yes, it is.
Because Foer was learning to memorize playing cards and to encode one highly specific abstract card combination, he didn't try to memorize soups and numbers. He created a scene featuring the physicist Albert Einstein, with his chaotic white hair, wearing glittery shoes, and literally moonwalking backward across a theatrical stage.
Which is such a vivid image.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. It reveals this fascinating paradox about high-level cognition. The secret to world-class elite memory isn't rigid academic seriousness. It requires you to regress, basically, to cultivate the wildly uninhibited, chaotic, boundaryless imagination of a toddler.
And that regression is often the hardest part for adults who are attempting the art of memory.
I can imagine. We're so conditioned to be serious.
Right. We spend decades being conditioned to think linearly, to categorize information neatly, and to suppress the bizarre. The mental athletes who dominate these national championships are the ones who have systematically dismantled those adult inhibitions.
They've trained their minds to instantly generate the most grotesque or hilarious imagery possible.
Because those are the evolutionary triggers that lock data into the brain with absolute permanence.
Okay, so visualizing a dancing cow to remember milk makes intuitive sense, because milk is a tangible, physical object. You just exaggerate it.
Right.
But here's where I hit a wall with this methodology.
Okay, where's the wall?
How do you visualize the number 7,429? Or how do you visualize the Queen of Clubs? Numbers and playing cards have no smell, no texture, and no inherent emotional weight. They are cold, abstract symbols.
Yeah.
So how are memory athletes taking massive spreadsheets of binary data and forcing them into these absurd multisensory palaces?
Yeah. That is the ultimate engineering problem of memory sports. Because you're right, raw imagination cannot efficiently process pure math.
It's just incompatible.
Exactly. To bridge that gap, memory athletes develop incredibly complex encoding algorithms. They build these mental ciphers that automatically translate abstract data into tangible human characters and dramatic actions.
Right, and the foundational cipher for this is the Major System, which actually dates all the way back to the 17th century. It is a phonetic translation matrix.
Yes. Instead of trying to visualize the shape of the number 3 or 4, which is practically impossible to make memorable.
Right, what does the 3 smell like? Nothing.
Exactly. So the major system converts numbers into specific consonant sounds. The elegance of the major system lies in its phonetic consistency. For instance, the number 1 translates to the hard T or D sound, the number 2 translates to the N sound, the number 3 translates to the M sound.
And the vowels just act as wildcards, right? Because they have no numerical value.
Exactly. Once you internalize this alphanumeric cipher, any string of random digits can be converted into consonants. You then insert vowels to build recognizable words.
So a string of meaningless math becomes a concrete noun. And then that noun becomes an absurd image, and that image gets dropped into the memory palace.
You've got it perfectly.
But there is a massive paradox here. When I look at the PAO system, which stands for Person, Action, Object, and is like the advanced high-speed evolution of the major system, it seems incredibly counterintuitive.
How so?
Well, in the PAO system, competitors pre-memorize a matrix where every 2-digit number from 00 to 99 is assigned a specific person, performing a specific action on a specific object.
Right.
If I'm already struggling to remember 6 random numbers, how does forcing my brain to remember Frank Sinatra, swinging a golf club, and smashing a watermelon make it easier? It feels like you are tripling the cognitive workload. You are asking the brain to memorize more data to remember less data.
I know, it absolutely sounds like a heavier cognitive load at first, but that's only until you understand the psychological concept of chunking and the biological limitations of human working memory.
Chunking, okay. Break that down.
In the 1950s, cognitive psychologist George Miller published this landmark paper on what is often called Miller's Law. It established that the average human working memory can only hold about 7 items at a time.
Which is precisely why standard phone numbers are 7 digits long.
Exactly. So when you look at this 6-digit number, say 34, 12, 78, your brain views it as 6 isolated, disconnected items. That pushes you right to the limit of your working memory.
The bucket is instantly full.
Precisely. But the PAO system bypasses this bottleneck through compression. Let's trace the mechanics of your example.
Okay.
In a competitor's pre-built mental spreadsheet, the first chunk, 34, always determines the person, so Frank Sinatra. The second chunk, 12, always determines the action, swinging a golf club. The final chunk, 78, always dictates the object, a watermelon.
Okay.
The competitor does not try to hold 6 numbers in their working memory. They instantly synthesize those 3 distinct data points into one highly integrated multi-sensory narrative event, Frank Sinatra smashing a watermelon with a golf club.
Oh, wow. So they're essentially creating a high-fidelity zip file for the brain.
Yes, they have chunked 6 discrete pieces of abstract data into one single visual image. The brain no longer sees 6 items, it sees one scene.
And by doing this, they completely bypass the biological bottleneck of the prefrontal cortex.
Exactly. They can process a 6-digit number, compress it into Sinatra, drop Sinatra onto the couch of their memory palace, and immediately move on to the next 6 digits. It is how they achieve the staggering speeds we see at the championships.
That is so incredibly mechanical. When you realize how aggressively mechanical the PAO system is, that these athletes are essentially just rapidly cross-referencing pre-built mental spreadsheets and deploying compression algorithms, it completely shatters the mythological illusion of the photographic memory.
It really does.
Because if human beings actually possessed digital camera minds, they wouldn't need to invent these exhausting, highly engineered translation matrices in the first place, right?
Exactly. The eidetic memory, the idea of a passive human digital camera that just records the visual world in high resolution, is perhaps the most pervasive myth in popular cognitive science.
So it's completely fake.
Well, during his year of training, Joshua Foer actively searched for a true photographic memory. He scoured medical literature, interviewed neuroscientists, chased down legends of savants, and the overwhelming consensus in the scientific community is that true, passive photographic memory does not exist in adult humans.
But wait, what about the documented cases of savants? We have all seen the documentaries of individuals who can, like, fly over a city in a helicopter and draw the entire skyline from memory. If they aren't taking a mental photograph, what exactly is happening?
They are executing incredibly fast, highly specialized pattern recognition.
Pattern recognition.
Yes. Their recall is not passive. It is an active structural process built on a dense, underlying web of organized knowledge within a specific domain. To illustrate the difference between passive recording and active pattern recognition, Foer cites one of the most famous studies in cognitive psychology. It was originally conducted by William Chase and Herbert Simon.
Oh, the chess study.
Yes, the chess grandmaster study.
The Chase and Simon study is brilliant because it completely isolates the variable of structural meaning. So basically, the researchers set up this experiment where they take a chess grandmaster, someone who has spent decades internalizing the game, and an absolute novice.
Right.
They expose both subjects to a chessboard containing roughly 30 pieces for just 5 seconds. Then they cover the board and ask them to physically reconstruct the exact layout of the pieces from memory.
And under standard conditions, the results are exactly what you would expect. The grandmaster reproduces the board almost flawlessly in seconds, while the novice struggles to place more than 5 or 6 pieces correctly.
Right, so to a casual observer, the grandmaster appears to have a photographic memory. They looked at a complex visual array for 5 seconds and downloaded it perfectly.
But the researchers introduce a second condition that completely dismantles that assumption. They take the exact same 30 chess pieces, but instead of arranging them in a logical game state, they place them on the board completely at random.
Just total chaos.
Exactly. They put pieces in impossible configurations, violating the structural rules of chess pawns on the back rank, overlapping knights, things that would never happen in a real game. They show this random board to the grandmaster for 5 seconds.
And in this randomized condition, the grandmaster's supposed photographic memory completely evaporates.
Completely. When faced with unstructured noise that defies the logic of their domain, the grandmaster performs marginally better than the absolute beginner. They cannot remember where the pieces are.
Which proves that the brain is not a camera. Because a digital camera does not care if the pixels represent a logical chess game or a chaotic mess of wood. It just captures the light.
Exactly. The grandmaster is not capturing light. They are reading a language.
That is the exact distinction. The grandmaster has this massive structural vocabulary of chess patterns. When they look at a logical board, they aren't memorizing 30 individual pieces on 64 squares. They look at it and their brain immediately chunks the information, recognizing it as, say, a Sicilian defense variation with a weakened queenside.
They are remembering one single cohesive concept. It's much like how the PAO system chunks 6 numbers into one scene.
Wait, so you're telling me that no one is just recording the world like a digital camera? They're really just incredibly fast, highly trained pattern recognizers.
Yes. When you remove the underlying structural logic, you remove their ability to chunk, and the genius instantly disappears. Extraordinary memory is fundamentally tied to meaning.
Wow. But, this reliance on structural vocabulary and intense practice introduces a deeply frustrating reality about human skill acquisition.
What's that?
Well, if memory or any skill is built on practice and pattern recognition, why do we inevitably stall out?
Ah, the plateau.
Right. Consider typing on a keyboard or driving a car. You learn the skill, your proficiency spikes rapidly in the first few months, and then you just hit a wall. You can type emails every single day for the next 20 years, and your words per minute will likely remain identical to what it was a decade ago. If repetition builds mastery, why does our improvement just unilaterally flatline?
This phenomenon is known in cognitive psychology as the autonomous stage of learning. It's part of the Fitz-Posner 3-stage model. When Joshua Foer was training for the memory championship, running his PAO system and building his palaces, he hit this wall hard. He referred to it as the OK Plateau.
The OK Plateau.
Yeah, it is the universal bottleneck where you become just okay at a task and your brain actively prevents you from getting better.
It's an energy-saving mechanism, right? The brain is automating the process to free up cognitive bandwidth.
Exactly. When you first learn to type, you are in the cognitive stage. You have to consciously think about the location of the T key and the H key. Your prefrontal cortex is highly engaged, building new neural pathways, and your improvement is rapid.
But then it becomes a habit.
Right. As those pathways myelinate and become efficient, the brain pushes the skill down into the basal ganglia and the cerebellum. It becomes automated. You hit the OK plateau. You are no longer thinking about the keys. Your fingers just move.
And the danger of automation is that you become blind to your own inefficiencies. You stop analyzing your mistakes because you aren't consciously engaged with the process anymore.
Exactly.
So casual repetition on autopilot will never, ever lead to mastery. It just reinforces your current plateau.
To shatter the OK plateau, you have to employ a methodology pioneered by psychologist Anders Ericsson, known as deliberate practice.
Deliberate practice.
Yes. Deliberate practice is the absolute antithesis of autopilot. It requires you to continuously, aggressively, and uncomfortably force your brain out of the autonomous stage and back into the cognitive
You
stage.
have to deconstruct your performance.
Isolate the micro weaknesses and engage in agonizing self-correction.
Foer's application of deliberate practice is fascinating because he was completely stuck. His times for memorizing a deck of cards had plateaued at around 2 minutes, and he could not break the barrier, no matter how many decks he memorized.
He was trapped on the OK plateau.
Right. So to break the plateau, he had to introduce extreme cognitive friction. He started using a metronome.
Oh, this part is brilliant.
It is. He would set the clicking pace to a speed that was physically and mentally faster than he could comfortably process the cards.
He was intentionally practicing at a speed where failure was a mathematical certainty.
Exactly. He was forcing himself to look at the cards faster than his brain could fully conjure the PAO image of Sinatra and the watermelon.
Right. By constantly operating slightly above his maximum neurological capacity, he was denying his brain the comfort of automation. He was demanding structural adaptation.
He was forcing his neural networks to myelinate faster, basically, to recognize the visual patterns in a fraction of a second less time.
It completely redefines how we view mastery. The old adage, practice makes perfect, is dangerously misleading. Repetitive practice just makes permanent. Deliberate practice makes perfect.
So to become truly great at something, to reach the upper echelons of human potential, you have to cultivate a deep tolerance for frustration. You have to willingly sit in the extreme, agonizing discomfort of constant failure, intentionally breaking your current limitations so they can rebuild themselves stronger.
And it is a grueling, exhausting psychological state, which is precisely why so few people ever push past the OK plateau in any discipline.
It's too painful.
Exactly. But Joshua Foer committed to the friction. For 12 months, he lived in that state of deliberate failure. He built dozens of elaborate memory palaces, internalized complex alphanumeric ciphers, assigned a deeply emotional imagery to thousands of abstract data points, and relentlessly pushed his processing speed against the ticking of a metronome.
And after a year of this intense neurological remodeling, he returned to the United States Memory Championship to test his hypothesis.
The climax of the book is the surreal return to the very convention hall where the journey started.
But the dynamic has entirely shifted. He is no longer the bewildered journalist standing in the back of the room with a notepad. He is a hyper-focused competitor.
He steps into the arena equipped with industrial-grade earplugs and a pair of blacked-out safety goggles with tiny pinholes drilled into the lenses, designed to eliminate every single photon of peripheral visual distraction.
Which really highlights the sheer cognitive fragility of the task. They have to maintain absolute, unbroken focus while running these internal architectural programs.
The gauntlet of events is a test of extreme cognitive endurance. They are required to memorize massive, unstructured matrices of random numbers. They have to study photographs of hundreds of faces paired with random names and perfectly recall them.
They must memorize stanzas of unpublished poetry, which introduces the unpredictable chaos of syntax, punctuation, and irregular line breaks.
And it all culminates in the ultimate test of working memory and processing speed, the speed cards event.
The speed cards finale is pure cognitive adrenaline. Under the bright lights, the competitors are handed a freshly, thoroughly shuffled deck of 52 playing cards. They have one opportunity to look at the deck, and they have to memorize the exact order as fast as humanly possible.
Thus intense pressure.
For the journalist who initially thought these people were mutants, tears through his deck. He is rapidly grouping the cards, converting them into chunked PAO imagery, and aggressively dropping those images along the loci of his mental palaces.
And he does it flawlessly.
He does. He not only completes the task, he sets a new national speed record. He defeats the reigning grandmasters and wins the title of United States Memory Champion.
It is a stunning empirical validation. By winning the championship, Foer proved beyond any shadow of a doubt, in a highly controlled and regulated environment, that his central thesis was correct.
The capacity for extraordinary mental performance is fundamentally built, not born.
With the proper architectural frameworks, spatial mapping, multisensory encoding, and grueling deliberate practice, a completely baseline human brain can execute feats that appear indistinguishable from magic to the untrained eye.
It is a triumphant narrative arc.
Yeah.
It makes you want to immediately start assigning celebrities to playing cards and building palaces out of your local grocery store.
It really does inspire you.
But there is a crucial pivot we have to make here, because while memorizing a deck of cards in under 2 minutes is a phenomenal feat of sportsmanship, it is ultimately an esoteric party trick. For those of us living in the reality of the 21st century, who have no intention of wearing pinhole goggles on a competitive stage, why does this ancient art of memory actually matter?
That is the profound philosophical shift that Foer addresses at the end of his journey. The relevance of the art of memory is inextricably linked to the technological era we currently inhabit.
The digital age.
Exactly. We are living in a period of unprecedented cognitive offloading. As we noted at the beginning, we have delegated our physical navigation, our factual recall, and our daily logistics to external digital devices. We have instant access to the sum total of human knowledge via the internet.
And the counterargument is often, why is that a bad thing? Why should I waste cognitive bandwidth memorizing the capital of Peru or the dates of the French Revolution when my phone can retrieve it in 0.4 seconds?
And it's a fair question, but the danger of that assumption lies in fundamentally misunderstanding the difference between external data and internal knowledge.
Okay, I'll unpack that.
Information residing on a server farm is inert. It is cold, disconnected data. When you access it via a screen, you are merely retrieving a fact. However, when information is taken and stored deep within your own neural network, when it is woven into your memory palaces through imagery, spatial awareness, and emotion, it undergoes an alchemical transformation.
So it becomes part of you.
It becomes integrated with the existing web of everything else you know. It is synthesized. External data is just information. Internalized memory is the foundation of actual wisdom.
I see exactly what you're saying. Your smartphone might hold the Wikipedia entry for the French Revolution, but your smartphone does not understand history. It cannot contextualize the data.
Precisely. Our internal biological memories form the structural scaffolding of our personal identity. The density of the information we hold inside our minds dictates the resolution with which we view the world.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Our internalized knowledge actually dictates our capacity for empathy because it allows us to draw upon historical context and connect our experiences with the lived realities of others. When we aggressively outsource our memory to a silicon chip, we're essentially hollowing out the richness of our own internal lives. We are thinning out our humanity.
So the ultimate takeaway from Foer's year-long experiment isn't about the mechanics of playing cards at all.
Not at all.
Practicing the art of memory building, the spatial palaces, engaging with the absurdity filter, sitting in the friction of deliberate practice, it's fundamentally an exercise in learning how to pay deep, aggressive, unshakable attention to the physical world around you.
It is a rebellion against the constant, shallow distraction of the digital age.
Yes, it is a commitment to cultivating a vibrant internal imagination and ensuring that the things you learn actually become a permanent structural part of who you are.
It is about reclaiming agency over your own cognitive landscape.
We have covered massive ground today. We started with the mundane frustration of the doorway effect and explored how a journalist dismantled the myth of the biological savant.
We traveled back to ancient Thessaly to understand how Simonides discovered the brain's evolutionary bias towards spatial mapping.
We walked through the architecture of the Method of Loci, explored the multisensory requirements of the absurdity filter, and dissected how chunking algorithms like the Major System and PAO bypass the limitations of human working memory.
And we looked at the agonizing reality of the OK Plateau and how true mastery requires the purposeful friction of deliberate practice.
So what does this all mean? As we close the book on Moonwalking with Einstein, what is the final structural implication of all this brain training?
Well, if we consider the mechanics of human innovation, the art of memory leaves us with an incredibly provocative question about the future of creativity.
Okay, lay it on us.
Psychologists define true creativity not as conjuring something entirely out of a vacuum, but as the ability to connect two completely disparate existing ideas to form a sudden novel synthesis.
Creativity is the act of seeing the hidden architecture connecting unrelated facts.
Exactly, but there is a biological prerequisite for that synthesis. Your brain can only connect the dots if the dots are actively stored inside your own neural network. If you are constantly offloading your memory to search engines, those dots are sitting in a data center, not in your prefrontal cortex.
The algorithms can connect the dots, but you cannot.
Precisely. This raises a critical question for our generation. By systematically outsourcing our memory to our devices, are we inadvertently outsourcing our biological capacity to ever have a truly original thought?
Wow.
If you want to be an innovator, a creator, or a truly wise individual, you must first commit to doing the difficult mechanical work of stocking your own mind with the raw materials of knowledge.
That is a staggering implication. The next time you find yourself standing in your kitchen completely blanking on why you walked in there, staring at the linoleum, don't just reflexively pull out your smartphone and assume your brain is a leaky bucket. Realize that you are standing inside a physical space that possesses the architectural capacity to hold the entire universe of human knowledge if you just learn how to hack the evolutionary wiring to place the furniture correctly. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Start paying attention, embrace the absolute absurdity of your own imagination, and go build your first memory palace today.